This is the plane that British Airways will be flying across the world through the 1990s and into the 21st century. The Boeing 747-400.
Let me do something. Let me pull up where you can see that winglet, which is a new deal, you know.
Every feature of this sophisticated aircraft is filmed by a publicity team before it goes into service. It's the first of a fleet of 21 that BA have on order at $135 million apiece, with still more to come. A huge investment in the air travel of the future.
That's great.
I think you have to pull forward another 15, 20 feet.
Now, we've lost him on here because we're at the bottom.
This is the plane that will spearhead the challenge by British Airways to join the big league, to be one of the world's main contenders in a new kind of sky war, in which there are no weapons, just power politics and money.
The world's biggest industry used to be armaments. I think for the first time in 1990, it'll be tourism. The absence of the threat of a major war in the world has had a huge impact on the economic market affecting aviation and on the industry. The civil side is now making far more money and far more concerned with building civil aircraft than the military side. First time it's ever happened.
As the threat of military war recedes, civil aviation is becoming the new battleground in a commercial war between nations and between airlines. As it enters the 90s, BA finds itself fighting the war on two fronts. Across the Atlantic, where it's competing with the American giants, and back home in Britain, where as Europe opens up, its smaller domestic rivals are snapping and complaining at its heels.
They want high fares, they want to protect a monopoly position, they don't want freedom at all, it's a myth.
British Airways have something like 90% of all the overseas licenses granted to British Airlines. In fact, the style that emerged was not that I believe the government intended, and it was entirely moved by political lobbying. And I don't think in the long term that will be or has been in the interest of the consumer.
The airline business in particular is a business where small is beautiful. I think that if you've got 300 or 400 planes, it's a bit like running a whole chain of wimpy bars. There's no way you can run that for the benefit of the passengers.
Cheeky British small fry may be an irritant, but American Airlines, the Western world's biggest, are the real enemy. BA have accused them of wanting to dominate the world. They deny it, of course.
Our objective is to be a very big airline that offers the absolutely highest standard of service in each of the markets in which it participates. And we hope to do that and at the same time be a responsible employer, and we hope to earn a satisfactory return for our shareholders. That's what business is about. Shareholders put assets in our hands and they say, go forth with these assets and be successful and smite the enemy. That's what we intend to do.
Other income was up by £6 million.
In London, the chief executive of British Airways, Sir Colin Marshall, is about to challenge the arrogance of American Airlines. But first, he has to please his investors.
In this business, however,
when he talks to people, he is not really talking to anybody but the shareholders, because that's his job. And he's got to please them before he pleases anybody else, including perhaps the passengers. Not at their expense, because the two don't quite relate to each other. But he's very, very aware of what the city can do to him.
That's a further and final announcement for any remaining passengers travelling on British Airways Supersonic Concorde flight to New York.
Yes, it is. Right. How are we doing this evening?
59 checked in so far.
That's all. Do with more than that.
On the evening of the same day, Sir Colin catches a Concorde flight to New York, then on to Dallas, Texas. Dallas is the citadel of American Airlines and its boss, Bob Crandall. Sir Colin's taking the fight to the enemy.
It's a bit like Daniel going into the lion's den, in the sense that it is the head office of American Airlines. American is now the largest of the US airlines, and it is probably the toughest competitor that we face on the Atlantic services.
Midnight's miles behind me. Dawn is coming soon, but I'm still rolling.
Dallas is more than just the soap opera capital of ranchers and oil tycoons. It's also the center of one of the richest air travel markets in the US.
Morning, Colin. I just got the first of the US papers this morning. New York Times is here.
All right, what does it tell us?
It tells us that the British Airways net has increased as a result of the announcement yesterday.
Good.
We also have here the Wall Street Journal, which is a very good headline about the airline rewarding workers for profit gain. So it's a very positive story from our standpoint.
Yes, that certainly is, isn't it?
At a different figure from us.
Let's see. Hello?
Colin, morning. David here.
Good morning, David. How are you?
David Burnside, calling from London, is Director of Public Affairs for BA. He's reporting on the press coverage of Sir Colin's speech to city investors.
How did we get on?
The Times is excellent. John Bell did a very good city commentary, which is very complimentary, and says that we are underrated and a very good investment, and we can take a rough time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's good.
Well, I gather the clippings are being faxed over here right now, so I'll be able to read through them shortly.
Yeah. Overall, it's good. Most of the city editors were supportive, but Legs continues to be its normal cynical self.
What do they call that in English dish? Pork roll, bubbles and squeak.
Oh, bubbles and squeak.
Yeah, that's what I was...
8 a.m. Dallas time. Sir Colin, after 3 hours sleep, fortifies himself with the British Airways breakfast before he goes into action against the Americans.
For a trip, I take 6 pair of shoes.
We're very pleased to have Sir Colin Marshall with us today, our chief executive. Today he'll be addressing the Metroplex Aviation Forum, which is a great opportunity for British Airways to get some words across America, particularly here in Dallas. So it's my privilege, it's my high honor to introduce to you today, ladies and gentlemen, our chief executive, Sir Colin Marshall.
Thank you very much, Dale. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You alluded to getting the message across America, and then you said especially Dallas. I thought the two were synonymous.
Later, Sir Colin informs the local press that he's not here for peace talks.
I'm here in Dallas, in particular, to have the opportunity of addressing the Metroplex Aviation Forum at lunchtime today, which clearly gives us a very good audience to hear our point of view, which is quite often at variance with the point of view expressed, especially by Bob Crandall, and recognizing this is his lion's den, I feel a little bit like Goliath coming into it, I suppose.
Daniel, perhaps?
Daniel, excuse me.
Quite all right.
The lion's den is DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, where American Airlines commands the runways with its fleet of nearly 700 planes. Its buccaneering chief executive, Bob Crandall, has announced a battle plan to hit the national flag carriers of Europe, especially British Airways.
You have to be something of a student of the airline industry to understand what Colin and I are arguing about. Fundamentally, I think that what we need to have internationally is a truly deregulated environment, an environment as close to the American model of deregulation where anybody who wants to fly an airplane can do so.
The American model of air travel is a completely free market system. In 10 years of intense competition, deregulation, as it's called, has seen dozens of airlines fold and a new breed of super airline emerge, so that 6 giants now control 84% of all air travel in the United States. British Airways argue that freedom of the skies is an American myth. They say the Americans are running a club that excludes foreigners. This is the accusation that Sir Colin Marshall, normally the mildest of men, is about to trumpet to an audience of aviation bigwigs in Bob Crandall's hometown.
For a long time, British Airways fought a lonely battle, trying to get some of the other European airlines to give up the protection of their governments and come out in the open to fight fair on level playing fields. Not everyone believes in playing the game this way. You have a most eminent citizen here who is the chairman and chief executive of American Airlines, has made it clear that he wants to be able to use DFW as a base from which to attack Europe, but that he views with considerable disfavor the idea of suspect foreigners such as ourselves being given increased access to your airports?
Colin, of course, takes objection to the fact that, among other things, I make the point I don't see how you can have a competitive airline industry if no new carrier can enter Heathrow. Colin simply doesn't seem to understand that if you're going to have a deregulated industry, you've got to have competition at individual airports as well as on particular routes and in particular countries.
Bob Crandall retorts correctly that he cannot fly into Heathrow Airport in London. It is simply that American is a Johnny-come-lately and Heathrow is a very crowded airport. I wish I could talk about how we fly on to a lot of other American cities, but I cannot because of something called cabotage. It is a doctrine here in the United States that says foreign airlines cannot do more than fly into a U.S. city and return directly home. A number of U.S. carriers, on the other hand, are free to fly into London and can fly passengers on to a variety of European cities. We're delighted to fly into DFW, but then we cannot go on to Los Angeles or San Francisco or any place else picking up passengers here. We have to sit around on the ground until evening and time to return to London. Hardly the most efficient way to use an aircraft which costs about $8,000 an hour doing absolutely nothing.
Sir Colin is arguing that foreign airlines should have the right to pick up passengers in the US and fly on. The Americans say that won't happen until they're given equivalent rights in Europe.
Now let's take the United States and the United Kingdom, for example. The United Kingdom is a small country, the United States a very large country. Obviously, flying within the United Kingdom is not of equivalent value to flying within the United States, simply because of the size of the market. So we've said to Colin Marshall and to others and to governments, look, if you want to fly within the United States, that's okay with us. But when we land an airplane in your country and want to go on somewhere else, you must arrange those rights for us. And we then, in turn, if the United States government gives you rights to fly within the United States, then we have traded things of equivalent value.
Open warfare between American and European carriers won't be officially declared until 1992, when the skies over Europe will be deregulated for the first time. That's why British observers are studying the American experience very closely. Freedom of the skies in America has brought an explosive increase in air travel. Airports now resemble bus terminals. The heart of this revolution in air travel has been a secret weapon, the supercomputer. This bunker in Tulsa, Oklahoma, conceals American Airlines' astonishing computerized reservation system known as Sabre. Its imitators are everywhere, and this one was the first of its kind. Bob Crandall once said that if he had to choose between Sabre and his airline, he'd sell the airline.
Its real significance is this: you could never have had airline deregulation without computerized reservation systems. There are 10 million individual airfares in Sabre. Every schedule of every airline everywhere in the world is in Sabre, and in many of these other systems, so that a travel agent at a CRT can call up any itinerary anywhere in the world, price it, issue a ticket, issue boarding passes, and hand you your documents, all in a matter of a few minutes.
Computer technology and deregulation have made it easier and cheaper to fly anywhere in America. In 10 years, fares have actually come down. In 1989, American Airlines alone carried nearly 70 million passengers, 3 times as many as British Airways. The aviation business is booming as never before. Airlines all over the world, private or state-owned, have gone on a buying spree that is still spiraling upwards. And this in the face of the immutable fact that aviation will always be a high-risk business.
Probably the only industry in the world that puts its main assets, namely its aircraft, at risk multiple times during the day. which makes insurance rates very high and also makes the possibility of loss, complete loss of these aircraft, a possibility to contend with every day of their working lives.
Seattle, in America's Northwest, is one of aviation's boom towns. It's the home base of the largest aircraft manufacturer in the world, Boeing. Boeing, which made a famous name for itself in World War II with its B-17 Flying Fortress, has been criticized over the production of some of its new aircraft, but Boeing strongly defend their air safety record.
We design an airplane so that there are several systems that can do a single job, that there can be failures and the airplane can continue. Starting back with the B-17, many of them came back from flights over Germany, full of holes, missing pieces, but they returned. You can have failures, and we've designed the airplane so that there are multiple ways of doing a job.
The truth is, Boeing is suffering from growing pains. It has an embarrassingly full order book of 1,700 aircraft to build, and for the first time in its history has fallen behind schedule. The British Airways 747-400 is 3 months overdue. But now, BA's own engineers check the final assembly.
We ought to do it in front of Lima Bravo.
If BA's inspection team aren't completely satisfied, and they're famous for their perfectionism, then delivery date will have to be postponed again.
But I mean, looking at the aeroplane right now, it would be very difficult to see it delivering on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah. What about Lord King? Is he coming? Hey, Julie, look, this is hanging down, and what will happen is they'll start rubbing on the ceiling panels. So we want a good clearance between the top of the ceiling panel and the cables.
Right.
If you had to build the whole thing, and then at the end sort of say, okay, now is it good? I don't think that would ever work. You'd spend the rest of your life checking.
Snug as you can get it, please.
For example, we build a wire loom, a bundle of wires with connectors on the end. That goes into a computer test. It's hooked up. Every single wire is checked against a program.
That's being stretched across there.
It goes into the airplane, and having been installed, it's checked. The electronic boxes are then installed, the power's turned on, and the system is checked.
Yeah, we just power it up for us. Alrighty. Let's see how it works. Can you change the presentation on that?
The rest of the boxes are then put in, and the system is all worked together.
Airspeed here, rather, and our elevation here.
We do what's called a failure modes and effect analysis. And we go through every single system in detail. What happens if this fails?
Okay, thank you.
What happens if this fails?
You're welcome.
What happens if this fails? Now, what happens if this and this fail?
Why did I put it through a white wire?
I don't know. It just brought it into another system.
If I could honestly look at you and say we build the perfect product and therefore there is no criticism warranted, that would be incorrect. Obviously, we can always do better. There are always ways to improve.
Boeing is sensitive about the kind of publicity their mistakes get. But as the world's biggest supplier of planes, they're more exposed than anyone else. And they're in a business where one tiny miscalculation can leap into the headlines.
Bundle here is supposed to come up through here, but it's a 5531. PI calls out,
if you revise this, those 3 wires don't show coming this far down.
The wiring on the 747-400 is scrupulously checked, all 135 miles of it. Just 12 months ago, wiring faults were found on 95 Boeing-made airliners. Today, they've uncovered some wrongly routed wires.
I know, we'll have to look at that problem. That's a whole different situation. This is basically where we're having the problem, is right down here at this clamping point. It doesn't call out the correct wire bundles, and a miscellaneous problem here with erroneous call out. That should be 5531. I'm going to get with engineering and get some drawing changes approved today so that they have coverage.
This already wired incorrectly, is that correct?
Correct.
So we've got to fix that.
Boeing has a long history building airplanes, sometimes at extremely high rate. During the war, B-17s, 16 of them a day coming out of this factory. In total today, 28 airplanes every month. That will actually rise over the next 2 years to a total of 34 airplanes every month. so that in a year's production, we're doing better than one every day, night and day.
Every plane that Boeing turns out is an astonishing piece of engineering architecture, a machine made up of 4.5 million separate parts. No other machine is subjected to such a relentless scrutiny before it becomes operational. BA's inspection team is led by Don Craig and Alan Dolly.
You know that we want to walk this aeroplane tomorrow, so we need this to complete.
Right, it will be, there'll be a switch in there tomorrow.
If you rob it from another aeroplane, how long will it take to fit?
Probably about an hour and a half or so.
Okay, and then you've got functions on top of that?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's not disastrous.
No, it's not big.
What other outstanding items do we have in the cockpit?
Any other technical problems?
None that I know of.
It's coming together, there's a bit more to do.
A team of BA engineers are actually based at Boeing all year round.
Need those because if this falls down, it'll block when it's in a cross-arc, we can't get egress, and we're very concerned about that. So, thank you. Thanks. Have a nice day.
We're aiming for an early start until we're finished tomorrow by midnight and get the flight in the day after.
Okay. We'll tell Boeing to start at 8 o'clock, and then we should fly on Thursday. That's good.
It is looking, it's improved in the last 6 hours, hasn't it?
Almost looks like an aeroplane now, doesn't it?
BA test pilot David Fleming takes a final look at the 747 he'll be flying for the first time. So at last, they're taking their $135 million baby for a ride.
We're on the takeoff roll. Take a seat, please.
Missed setting power.
Thrust set.
Go off the right, tells me to go to the left.
80.
Okay, go to the left, it should tell me to go to the right. It does.
V1, rotate. Positive rate.
Gear up.
Yeah, let's let them cool for a while, all right?
Oh, a bit warmer, I think. Okay, we've got plenty of time.
What people never realise is that people like Dave and I and all the engineers that work for me, indeed all the engineers who work for British Airways and the pilots, mentally, whenever you do anything, the first thing you always think about is safety. And it's a very personal thing.
What I'm going to do is induce a Dutch roll, put some rudder in and get basically the thing to swing. Then we'll put a yaw damper in and make sure it actually literally damps it out. That's the autopilot coming out.
I'll put them in for you if you like, David, when you're ready.
Okay, just put one at a time in. And here we go. Put one in.
Okay, going in.
Alright, here we go. Put the other one in. That's it, beautiful.
The new aircraft will give BA a competitive edge on those lucrative long-haul routes because it has a greater range than its predecessors.
Now we're expecting this to change colour.
It's controlled by the latest computer and navigation systems. Engineers say the new technology will also make this a safer plane.
We could actually design any form of transport so that it is dead safe, but it would either stay in the dock or in the station or in the garage or in the hangar. That isn't going to get people from A to B, 25 millions a year in the case of British Airways. And all you can do is improve safety all of the time, and that's what we're about.
The automatic announcement didn't work.
You know, I was listening on PA during the drop, and I thought I heard it.
I was listening, and I had it turned up full.
It wasn't loud, but I heard something. Somebody was talking on the PA. I didn't listen.
It was me talking to see if they could hear me down there.
No, before that.
That was the general stuff they've had running to make sure that
And I'll put the cabin back to automatic, so stand by your ears.
Speed brakes extend.
Yeah, you just start your watch again.
Oh, bloody hell, sorry.
This time it was the new technology that caused the confusion.
They were up.
He strictly put 3 on and it was up.
So now they'll do it by the book.
If we get a copy of the ops manual on board? Send it up here, volume 2, please. Okay, the next thing is 0.79, the SLAM excels.
Okay, I'll give it a turn around first.
What's it got? The document says 1 through 4, and I don't think that's right. We have a question on the number 5 spoiler, number 5 and number 8 spoilers, and we'll check them with the engineering people when we get back. I think they're okay. I think our document's wrong.
At the end of the day, we are legally responsible, and if any of us get it wrong, from the mechanic working on the aeroplane to the engineering director or myself when I was chief engineer, legally responsible, we could actually end up having to answer for that. And just think of some of the more recent accidents in the transport industry outside of the aviation industry, where perhaps they don't pay quite so much attention to the total safety in every single angle. Some of those industries are having some serious problems at the moment.
308, okay?
Yeah.
Changing over.
188 trim and the stall speed 165.
There are no shortcuts in this rigorous testing procedure. The major airlines may be at war over who commands the skies, but where air safety is concerned, they've declared an armistice. They all know how much they have to lose.
165. Right on the numbers.
When you're actually working on it and managing what's going to happen, you never think my daughter's going to be on here. It's always, this has got to be a safe aeroplane. It's not just for my friends, colleagues, relations, and so on and so forth. And that really is the acid test. Would you put your wife and children on it and let it go off? And we have to do everything like that.
The worst nightmare comes true when it's one of your planes that meets with disaster.
It's clear that the fire, which produced temperatures above 500 degrees centigrade inside the plane, virtually severed the tail section.
In 1985, 55 people were killed when a Boeing 737, owned by BA, burst into flames at Manchester Airport.
The entire top of the front section from the passenger door to the wings was ripped away, leaving the Boeing 737 looking, as one survivor put it, like a peeled banana.
In 1989, a similar plane belonging to Aloha Airlines had a terrifying mid-air accident before making an emergency landing.
Confirmed report that a member of the crew may have been sucked out of the aircraft.
In both cases, the question was asked, was the accident bad luck or bad design? But when a door blew out on a United Airlines jumbo, a shock wave ran through the industry. It was suspected that the accident had been caused by a fault in the door's locking system. BA's Air Safety Committee, which meets every month with directors as well as top engineers present, were quick to take action.
I think it's important that we should know what the implications are for British Airways of the accident to the United Airways airplane at Hawaii. Peter, can you talk to the committee?
There is a modification available which we've embodied on the greater part of our fleet, but perhaps for that sort of detail I could ask Alistair if he would brief the committee.
We did quite a lot of analysis of this particular locking system, and we launched that modification, and very fortunately, by the time this incident occurred, we've only got 3 aircraft that have not been modified, and they will be done during the course of the next few days.
We've got 37 out of the 40 747s where the work has been done, the
That's
modification
right.
work. Are you anticipating we're going to have to spend any more than we had originally planned?
No. What I would emphasize is that all this work was work that we had foreseen.
Does it affect your view on the safety of these aircraft in any way?
No, not at all.
Well, you're absolutely convinced that they are as safe as they can be?
Absolutely, yes.
As a mark of the seriousness it brings to the question of air safety, British Airways publishes a report every 2 months that covers all incidents, however minor. But the publicity air safety gets elsewhere is of a different order. People in the aviation industry say that the coverage of air safety in the popular press is ludicrously distorted.
Subjects like safety and security used to come up every 5-10 years whenever there was an accident or an incident. It was looked at, it was reported a safety incident. Now it runs day in, day out. And there are certain national newspapers who are quite prepared to manufacture a story about a safety or security incident when it bears no relation to the facts. You take a 4-inch crack in an aircraft, you stick it onto the front of a popular newspaper, you use colour journalism, and you make that crack look big. Disaster, death jet in the air. That's absolute crap. Bears no relation to reality, but that is allowable, permissible in some of the standards we now see in journalism.
The press seized upon BA's discomfort when its new baby, the Boeing 747-400, was attacked as unsafe even before it was delivered. Separated from those strident headlines, the story was simply that European aviation authorities were insisting on still higher standards of construction.
We had a pretty rough press, not our fault,
on 747-400's delays, safety problems, are Boeing up to standard or not. And the subject is very hot at the minute on safety. So I think we've got to address it tomorrow. What we're trying to do, and you've got to okay the budget yet, is to think of any PR means of exploiting the newness, the technological advance of the 747-400. Singapore, I think, are playing it up well at the minute. We can't take safety head on as a PR issue, or we will protest too much. The only thing we can do is to take something out of this vast investment we're making and try and exploit it in media terms.
The formula -1 or the index.
For an airline chief, a press conference that touches on air safety is like going to the dentist. A necessary but often painful encounter.
You've said many times that safety is paramount. If changes had to be made, some of the early ones would be flying with standards which are different from the subsequent aircraft until they could go back and be retrofitted. I know an aircraft is safe or it isn't.
I mean, let's stress there is nothing unsafe about the 747 aircraft, either those that are flying today nor the new one that is coming in.
There's a lot of wood touching goes on when safety is discussed. There are some carriers who've never had an accident, but they won't talk about it, because the moment they do, they think, well, if we start talking about this and promote it, and we have one, we're going to get in worse trouble than if we didn't say so. All sorts of things can cause accidents. Sadly, it's the human factor that causes most, and most of that is to do with pilot error. But they're still very few and far between, and when you consider the vast number of aircraft now flying and the huge number of passengers they're carrying, the loss rate is extremely low. But it is an issue that the airlines have to live with and contend with emergency procedures and contingency plans every day of their working lives.
And on this working day in Seattle, the test flight is nearly over.
Well, here we are, just towards the end of our customer one flight on this aeroplane.
Okay, landing gear.
Landing gear go down.
We found nothing of any concern at all. There's a few minor points, but not very many. We won't need to refly so that we can accept this aeroplane in 2 days.
Another 100 feet. Another 160 feet.
And a surface wind.
Too low gear. Too low gear.
Okay, let it go.
Gear down.
That's
then.
it. Gear down then. Thanks very much.
And a surface wind as well, please. Tower say wind.
Wind 130 at 5.
The new 747's been pushed to the limit of its performance. But this final test, landing, will test the pilot more than the plane. Pilot error is responsible for 76% of all accidents.
100. 50. 30.
Right out was reading 1,500 feet when we climbed way above that. They didn't have a spare unit on board, so all they did was trip the circuit breaker and it cleared itself.
I don't think we have anything significant that's going to cause us to have any reservations at all.
There's nothing major there at all. I think basically it's a very good aircraft.
Okay, so we go and tell them that we'll make them an offer for it, John. Well.
Right, well, that's about it.
Down to the transfer of the funds.
Hello, John. Could you transfer the money now, please? Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The money's been transferred, the delivery's complete. You've bought yourself an airplane. Here are the keys.
Another 8 of the same one.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much, TK.
A handshake completes a deal that has cost BA $135 million.
Thank you for all the help.
We have 2.5 minutes to airtime.
As BA buys itself a new plane in Seattle, in New York, on closed-circuit TV, Sir Colin Marshall sells the airline to American investors.
A question from New York City?
Yes, my question is, what UK and European competitors are likely to undergo the most change as a result of liberalization, and how do you see this affecting British Airways?
In terms of most change, I think one would have to look at the medium-sized airlines in Europe.
Give me a signal, Sir Colin.
Sir Colin draws attention to the European market, where what used to be a world of cosy deals between state-subsidized airlines is threatening to become a battlefront. By 1992, under common market rules, the airways in Europe will have gone the American way and become deregulated. A free market for air travellers will mean a free-for-all between the major flag carriers, with medium-sized newcomers and give-it-a-go small fry all competing for a piece of the action. But in the run-up to 92, the new boys are complaining that BA is throwing its weight around. Harry Goodman of Air Europe says they're not the great champions of free competition they claim to be.
They are the pioneers, so they say, and you pick up the press, of wanting deregulation in Europe, they're wanting access, they're wanting low fares. They've never produced a low fare in their history. The only time they ever want a low fare is if they find they've got 10,000 seats to sell in the next 10 days. But the major business customers have their fares put up every year, regularly at the same time as their competition. Very interesting.
Some fares could come down now, yes, if the constraints and restrictions that are imposed by certain of the governments on the continent of Europe were removed.
Most of Europe's major airlines are state-owned, which is one of the reasons why it's much more expensive to fly in Europe than it is in America. BA concede they could bring their fares down in Europe, but argue that their first aim is quality.
What's quality? Would you pay £100 extra to go to Paris for an ounce of caviar? Or an inch more seat room? Or a free newspaper? Would you or your wife go into a shop and pay that? For that? Is that quality? I doubt it.
Of course he's overstating his case, but it's a nice little catchy phrase that'll get press reporting. We set our prices on our quality and we'll compete in the marketplace. He can set his prices whatever level he wants and he can provide caviar or hamburgers, we don't mind. And we'll compete with him.
Although British Airways say they welcome the freedom 1992 will bring, they know it will strengthen Harry Goodman's airline, which has been astutely tailored for the new Europe. With 70 new planes on order, Air Europe is becoming a real threat to BA.
I would style them as the worst of the companies wanting to retain the status quo. If you listen to Colin Marshall, if you listen to Lord King, they're screaming for freedom of the skies. There is a certain amount of freedom now. They haven't taken advantage of it. They still have put their fares up at the same time as their major flag carriers in Europe every year since they've had the freedom to lower them.
We don't set the competitive environment. Europe does. The United Kingdom government does. The United States negotiates air service agreements, bilateral agreements between governments. The state-subsidized airlines in Europe, backed by their governments, maintain monopoly positions. So I can understand fair game for Harry Goodman to criticize British Airways, but it's not quite correct and not quite fair.
In 1984, Richard Branson, record seller, part-time balloonist and charming self-publicist, stuck his Virgin label on a jumbo and announced himself a competitor to British Airways.
Any chance of these tickets?
A cheeky chappie of air travel, so far has only 5 planes. He's an irritant rather than a threat to the majors. But before the decade is out, there could be dozens more like him.
We've won all the business awards as best airline. We've won the award for best transatlantic airline. And if you're the best, there's always a market for the best. You can only be the best if you're small. You can't possibly be the best if you're an enormous airline. Basically, it's the difference between running a private club or running a massive big chain of McDonald's. I obviously try to run the airline in as personalized a manner as possible.
Branson has been known to play steward on his own planes. Rumors that he also flies them are unfounded.
I've told all our staff worldwide that if a plane is ever delayed more than 90 minutes, to ring me wherever I am, and if it's at 5 in the morning, I want them to wake me up. And also make a point of, if there is a delay of 1.5 hours, of writing a personal letter to every passenger.
Unlike Freddie Laker, Branson's made a point of staying small, and he's found a gap in the market. The young like his style. After all, a houseboat in Little Venice is a long way from the corporate headquarters of BA.
They have many advantages. I mean, for instance, we're not allowed to fly from Heathrow. They are allowed to fly from Heathrow. They've taken over all the hangar space at Gatwick. We want a hangar space. They won't let us have any. They have been given Concorde on a platter, with the government having written off all the past debts of Concorde. Running BA with what they've been given, except for the size, is a relatively easy thing. They've been given masses of assets at a very low price.
Branson's a skirmisher, but an airline like British Midland, which is in direct competition with BA on domestic routes, has more at stake. British Midland accused BA of using monopolist tactics to try to squeeze them out.
British Airways is competing with some of our very smallest airlines on routes that will barely stand competition, which they know they can never make any money at, but they know that in competing with us will inflict financial damage onto us as a smaller competitor. That is predatory. And that, I think, is the area that I have the greatest concern for the future.
They can't take the heat when we give them competition, but they're very good at moaning and complaining to the press and to Consumers Association and to members of Parliament when they think they're being dominated by big, bad British Airways.
What we don't want to happen is to what's happened in the oil industry. We don't want the seven sisters of the oil industry to be the seven big brothers of the airline industry. There has got to be a system whereby new entrants can get access to the market and offer their product to the consumer.
But Europe's a small battlefield compared with the US, and it's to Dallas-Fort Worth that BA's thoughts keep enviously turning. Here, their great rival, American Airlines, has a cozy relationship with the local airports authority.
An airline company's operational presence at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport is such that it requires a single terminal to support its operations. The airport board sees no problem in the airline company proceeding to develop that facility. And we as airport operators believe that it would be a very prudent move on American Airlines' part to develop the west side for its operational purposes.
At Dallas-Fort Worth, American has the use of 6 runways, compared with 2 for BA at Heathrow, and the exclusive use of its own terminal. The control tower with its battery of air traffic monitors belongs not to the airport authority, but to American Airlines itself.
American 281 traffic is clearing your tail now, sir. Your power back and taxi is approved. They'll give you a right turnout taxiway 20. Have a good flight, sir.
It's conditions like these that give American Airlines and other US carriers an unfair advantage. The British believe their airport authority sells them short.
From where we sit, British Airports Authority are more interested in making money on duty-frees, on shops, than building new runways. If you look at a place in the desert in the States like Dallas-Fort Worth, it has 6. If you look at Denver in Colorado, they're building 14. Now, the British Airports Authority seem to have no interest in supplying a public service and investing hundreds of millions in strips of concrete. You know, their interest is, as a monopoly, to supply a bigger return for their shareholders. You know, if you look at Gatwick Airport is the second busiest international airport in the world. It's full to saturation. It has 1 runway. It takes one thing to go wrong, and all the schedules are put out of phase. The public are inconvenienced. Now, that's no inconvenience to the British Airports Authority, because they go back into the airport. What do? They spend money at the shops, at the restaurants, at the bars. That's more revenue for BAA.
In the last financial year, BAA made profits of £198 million, much of it from duty-free shops, and has been drawn to the attention of the Office of Fair Trading.
British Airways is desperately trying to get its own terminal at a British airport, exclusively its own terminal. And the only one it's actually got in the world is at New York. Its terminal at Kennedy is actually owned by BA. Can't get one here. They've asked the BAA, the British Airports Authority that was, for these terminals. They were promised that Terminal 4 Heathrow would be just theirs. The same sort of promise was made about the North Terminal at Gatwick. But you know, when commercial pressures apply, then other tenants are allowed in.
The airlines argue that more runways and more terminals are needed at British airports. If the BAA puts a brake on expansion, then 1992 will mean more congestion and longer queues. British Airways are especially cramped.
We would much prefer to have everything in one terminal, and that is our hope for the 5th terminal being approved and eventually built and opened at Heathrow. If we don't have it, then we are going to see happen to the airline industry in this country what happened to the docks. Because people didn't invest, weren't far-sighted enough to really develop the Port of London, the business went off to the continent. It's extremely important indeed for the whole future of this country, not just for British Airways itself, but for London and for the country as a whole and the commerce of Britain.
As British Airways heads into a new decade, it stands 7th in size and power among the world's top airlines. Number 1 is American Airlines. Operating out of the Texas desert, it's put down a blueprint for the 90s in which there will be more mergers and fewer airlines. In an expanding world, the big get bigger and the small get swallowed.
I really think that one of the great challenges of the 1990s and the early part of the next century is how we're going to develop this business. Today, travel and tourism is the largest employer in the world. It is bigger than the steel business and the automobile business combined. And it employs more people around the world, and no matter where you go in the world, if you take a poll and you say to people, what would you like to do more of? And they invariably say travel. I'd like to travel more. So you've got a great, huge business, right, that employs lots of people, that is very labor-intensive, that creates wealth, right, that promotes peace and harmony because, as we know one another better, we have less reason to argue. And what's happening to it? All the governments of the world are systematically suppressing it. I'll give you a strange example. If you go into any small town in any country, anywhere in the world, and say, I'm in the dog food business, I'm going to build a new dog food plant here, the mayor and the local dignitaries will have great celebration. They're going to have a dog food plant. But if I come in as an airline, say I'd like to have another runway, everybody throws up their hands. My goodness, things are going to be more noisy. And if we promote travel and tourism, we've got to build more runways, and we've got to build more airports, and we've got to encourage airline competition, and we're not doing that today.
In another part of America, the chairman of British Airways, Lord King, has come to pick up a plane.
I've said before that the world could not go about its business in the way that it does if Boeing had not built itself the company.
This 747-400, the first of many, is BA's stake in the future, a challenge to the Americans as well as to its rivals in Europe. It is entering a world in which the old certainties and securities have gone forever.